Good morning, Dr. Trevor Miller with Integrated Health of Indiana. And I had an interesting question on Facebook that I thought I would address with everybody, including another response to you, Amy, on your post. So I'm going to talk about, here's what we talked about. A person, Amy Ellis, asked Trevor Miller, what do you think about the Starch Solution? And I went to Dr. McDougall's site and I started to research the book a little bit, and then I looked at his recipes. And I quickly responded and said, I'm not a fan of purely vegan diets. So my philosophy is one like that of Dr. Chris Kresser or Dr. Mark Hyman. These approaches are plant heavy, but still with high quality protein. Sorry for the all caps, but I wanted to emphasize that. Interestingly enough, one can be healthy on a vegan diet. One can also be healthy on a vegetarian diet, as well as keto, carnivore, or whatever one wants to compare to the standard American diet. Note in there, I'm not comparing each of these. I'm not comparing keto to vegan. I'm not comparing vegan to vegetarian. That's not the comparison. The comparison is to the highly processed standard American diet, which is also appropriately acronymed the SAD diet. With that said, each of these approaches are tools to do something different. Is your microbiome off? A vegan or vegetarian approach is very good. Why? Because it's high in fiber. But remember to look at what most of them suffer from, which are autoimmune diseases. So if you have, I'll just read the whole post, but remember to look at what they mostly suffer from: autoimmune diseases. Hormones off, jump to keto. Please make them good fats and paleo train. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around carnivore. Just simple looking at us. Eyes are in the front of our heads. We are predatory by nature. If you look at all the animal species with the eyes in front of their heads, they are predators. We are also termed an apex predator. So why do vegans and vegetarians suffer from autoimmune disorders? Might they be gluten sensitive? Maybe they are APOE3/4/4/4, which both make us inflammatory phenotypes. This basically says that their genetics tend to run hot. That's kind of paraphrased, so that they present as hot is an oversimplification, but it works. What about the problems vegan and vegetarians have with hormones? Where do their hormones come from? Fats. That is why pescatarians tend to be healthy and very long-lived. They get great omega-3 fats, as well as a sense of purpose and strong family units. Most of the Blue Zone peeps were pescatarian. They also lived at altitude. They had to walk uphill quite a bit. However, I'm not saying that vegans and vegetarians are unhealthy. It just takes a little work and planning. Also, early in the book, he talks about veganism as being healthy for the environment. In the book Drawdown, they discuss this. If one is vegetarian and eats Twizzlers and Beyond Meat, guess what? They are actually worse for the environment. They tend to be actually not any better than eating CAFO meat. But if they eat local and get their produce from regenerative farms, then they do draw down carbon and help the environment. And oops, I hit return too early. The main issue I have with him and his recipes, they take out a lot of really good stuff. For me, the choline in eggs is great for my brain. I am APOE3/4. I have SNPs in my genetics that make me sensitive to gluten and gliadin. This is all a very long-winded way to say that diets diets that say this is the diet for people, as well as blanket statements, are rarely right or turn out to be true. Know yourself. It doesn't hurt to test your hypothesis. I tend to like this slogan: eat plants, a little bit of good high quality protein, and not too much of either. Doctors like myself should be used in difficult cases. We are great at figuring out what's wrong and helping figure out a way to deal with it, but putting in a little work ahead of time helps eliminate a lot of noise. Amy then, and Amy, don't forget, most corn, soy, and wheat is nothing like it used to be. Our dwarf wheat is bad stuff. Amy replies, I agree with what you say. And what is troubling to me is people don't tend to fact check all these diet fads and tend to go with a diet that someone on YouTube did and lost X amount of weight. It could totally mess up their system up much more than it already is. Also, how can we make people aware of such things as APOE 2, 3, 4 status? I know 2 is the best, or 2 is the least, but people do not know nor understand what we talk about. I've been reading studies on SNPs and am intrigued by how they correlate with disease and drug response. Again, people are not aware of what truly makes their bodies tick. I get frustrated and overwhelmed trying to explain these things, not to mention throw all the diets in the hat and just pick one and run with it. Thank you for your input. I always enjoy reading your point of views. So, how to address APOE 3-4 status, or what that is? Very simply, you can go to 23andMe and get their little special done, and that happens. I used to be able to take their raw data file and use it with my DNA supplementation software, and that would allow me to figure that out also. But at this point in time, so much has been taken out of 23andMe that it's no longer that viable for using the way that I use it and a lot of other functional medicine doctors use it. With that said, when we look at those types of things, so that's how you get the APOE 3-4. Dr. McDougall's book, I do want to go back and address it. I did finish it. He runs along the same vein as kind of Terry Walls, Dr. Terry Walls of the Walls Protocol. I totally agree with the fiber issue that he talks about. I've been testing my blood sugars now for several years, my ketones and blood sugars now for several years. And when I eat fiber tends to slow the release of sugar into the system. And it's great for the microbiome. The science coming out about the microbiome is probably going to start to revolutionize medicine. Whereas Amy is talking about, she really likes how the SNPs start to affect the how you metabolize drugs. The thing that really isn't taken into account there is what does the microbiome look like, because the enzymes that they produce also affect how we digest food, how we process drugs, how we do all of that. And when we start to look at all of these things, so for Dr. McDougall's book, for me, I feel like there are a lot of I'm looking for not a politically correct way to say it. I just believe it was done in 2012. The science, we have 8 more years of science. Keto just really started to explode in the last couple of years. But once again, I think McDougall's diet, I think keto, I think paleo, I think carnivore, these are all different ways they're tools. They're tools to do certain things. And as you are doing those certain things, you got to know what the end point is. because typically as humans, we are omnivores. Look at our teeth. We have teeth for grinding the grains and grinding the legumes and chewing. We have incisors to tear through meat. And we do live in quite a bit of excess. So this kind of goes to the point that we live like the emperors of old, and that's why we have all of these diseases of excess. And so when we start to plow through that, you know what? Is it bad to get your amino acids from good sources of protein? No, it doesn't seem to be, because good sources of protein that, side note, Dr. McDougall talks about proteins being harmful for the environment. If you have regenerative farming going on, you draw down carbon. You draw down carbon more so than if you ate soybeans and tofu. It's the science that has progressed from the time that he wrote the book. And once again, my philosophical slant, the way I want to believe, and the way that when I test my patients, it plays out. Hey, if you're diabetic, keto, we can get you off of the insulin typically pretty quickly if you follow the program. Then we start to reintroduce things. But there isn't a healthy diet, and Dr. McDougall's diet is the same. There isn't a healthy diet on the planet that says eat Zagnuts, Twizzlers, Reese's Cups. None of those things. They're highly processed foods. They're very nutritionally deficient. They're void of anything that's really good for you. They satisfy the frontal cortex and the dopamine centers, and that's about it. And so going back into these things, it's very, very important to look at these and say, hey, you know what? It seems like a foundational diet seems to be lots of vegetables and fruits that you cook and prepare at home. And then we're going to add in, with that, we're going to add in good sources of protein, but the protein is about the size of the palm of your hand. And you get easier amino acids out of that. So if you look at nutritional density of foods, look at nature. If you see animals in nature, what do they eat? And so I kind of agree with Dr. McDougall here. They don't eat the muscle meats. They eat the organs, the tripe, the offal. That's what those animals eat. And they leave the proteins, they leave the back straps, they leave all of that stuff for the scavengers. So if we take a hint from nature, what should we be eating? Should we probably be eating the heart and the liver? I can't wrap my head around eating intestines. I've never prepared it, but I've never had anybody say, hey, this is the way you do it. But I have eaten heart, I have eaten liver, kidney. You know, those are things that I have eaten a lot of and really taken my health to a new level. And honestly, taken a lot of my patients' health to a new level. So I say take his book and that with a grain of salt. But, you know, the foundational diet, you actually also have to be healthy enough to eat a foundational diet. Because if you've been existing off of highly processed foods, crackers and cookies and packaged meats and stuff like that, then your microbiome's going to be off. And when you start to eat lots of good fiber and foods like that, you're going to get gassy and you're going to go through a lot of issues. So that's where, you know, the doctor comes through, and that's where we try to help. So if you have questions about that kind of stuff and living that way, then drop me a line, Dr. Miller, Dr. Miller at integratedhealthofIndiana.com. You can go to indianachiropractic.com, and that's my website. Happy to help in any way, shape, or form that I can. And if this created more questions, hey, I love answering them, so fire away. With that being said, have a great day. Thank you for taking this time to look into the health of you and your loved ones. This broadcast does not constitute a doctor-patient relationship. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement or substitute for care. If you are having issues, please seek a qualified professional trained in functional medicine. We would be happy to be of assistance with both in-person and virtual consultations. Thank you.